For decades, when FIFA called, cities answered. They changed laws, adjusted budgets, and accepted demands worth billions because hosting the World Cup was supposed to be the ultimate prize. Global prestige, economic growth, tourism, and international attention. For years, FIFA operated with one simple assumption. If one city refused, another would say yes. But something changed on the road to World Cup 2026. For the first time in years, host cities began pushing back. Lawyers challenged FIFA's legal protections, officials questioned financial obligations, and governments resisted demands once considered untouchable. Suddenly, the most powerful institution in global football encountered something it rarely faces: resistance. What is happening behind closed doors ahead of World Cup 2026 is not just a logistical dispute. It is a power struggle that could redefine how the World Cup is hosted for decades to come. To understand why cities are fighting back, you first need to understand how FIFA built this system. The World Cup is not just football. It is one of the most valuable sporting events on Earth, attracting billions of viewers and generating enormous revenue through sponsorships, broadcasting rights, licensing, and hospitality deals. That scale gave FIFA extraordinary leverage. For decades, host cities competed fiercely for the chance to host. If one city hesitated, another stepped forward. That imbalance shaped negotiations for generations. Requirements expanded, infrastructure expectations grew, and legal accommodations became standard practice. FIFA became accustomed to setting terms rather than negotiating them because the demand to host was overwhelming. But systems built on unquestioned leverage eventually faced scrutiny. And by the time preparations for 2026 began, that scrutiny had arrived. Then came Canada, where FIFA encountered something unexpected. Toronto and Vancouver became key battlegrounds as local officials reviewed the obligations attached to hosting World Cup matches. What they found raised difficult questions. Not because they opposed football, but because some of FIFA's requirements collided directly with local legal systems, financial accountability standards, and political realities. Officials began asking who would carry liability, who would absorb expanded security costs, and what legal exemptions were expected. These were not symbolic objections. They were structural challenges to FIFA's traditional operating model. Instead of quietly approving every request, local governments pushed back, negotiated, and demanded revisions. In several cases, FIFA was forced to compromise. The changes were not dramatic, but they revealed something important. FIFA could be pressured, but money is only part of the story. The deeper issue is transparency. One of the biggest frustrations local governments face when preparing for events of this scale is uncertainty. Early financial projections often rely on optimistic assumptions: visitor spending estimates, tourism growth forecasts, infrastructure efficiency targets, and revenue multipliers that are difficult to verify in real time. On paper, these numbers can make hosting appear overwhelmingly beneficial, but large-scale international events rarely unfold exactly as projected. As planning evolves, costs shift. Security requirements increase. Transportation demands expand. Emergency planning becomes more complex. Temporary solutions become permanent expenses. And by the time revised estimates emerge, political leaders are often already committed. This creates a difficult reality for local governments. Officials are expected to justify decisions using numbers that may change dramatically over time. Taxpayers are asked to trust projections that cannot always be guaranteed. And once preparations reach an advanced stage, reversing course becomes politically and financially difficult. That is why transparency has become such a central issue ahead of World Cup 2026. Municipal leaders are demanding clearer reporting, stricter oversight, and more detailed accountability mechanisms than many host cities accepted in previous decades. For FIFA, this represents a fundamental challenge. The organization has traditionally operated within a system built on speed, scale, and centralized control. But modern host cities increasingly expect open financial disclosure, legal clarity, and measurable accountability. That tension between global sporting ambition and local public scrutiny is becoming one of the defining pressures shaping this tournament. Then attention shifted to money. Every World Cup generates enormous revenue through television rights, sponsorship agreements, licensing, ticket sales, and global marketing. But hosting carries substantial hidden costs: security operations, transportation upgrades, emergency services, infrastructure adjustments, staffing, and logistical coordination often fall heavily on local governments. Once these numbers become public, scrutiny intensifies. Taxpayers demand answers. Journalists investigate spending decisions. Political leaders face pressure to justify commitments made years earlier. The debate is no longer simply about football. It becomes a debate about risk. Who profits, who pays, and who absorbs the consequences if projections fall short. That financial tension has become one of the defining stories of World Cup 2026. Some cities did not negotiate at all. They walked away, Chicago withdrew, Pittsburgh stepped back. Other potential hosts reconsidered their involvement entirely. Each decision reflected different local realities. From budget concerns to political pressure and infrastructure limitations, none of these individual withdrawals threaten FIFA's ability to stage the tournament. The World Cup will always attract interest, but collectively, these decisions reveal something larger. The era of automatic compliance may be ending. Cities now have access to decades of financial data and historical examples. They can study previous tournaments, compare projections to outcomes, and evaluate whether the promised benefits actually materialized. That knowledge changes negotiations. And once cities negotiate from information rather than emotion, FIFA's leverage becomes more contested. This is not just a North American story. Across the world, governments are becoming more cautious with mega events. The political climate has changed. Public scrutiny is stronger, transparency demands are higher, and social media can turn controversial spending decisions into global debates overnight. Every contract is examined. Every projection is challenged. Every promise is tested. For FIFA, this represents a structural shift. The organization remains one of the most powerful institutions in sport, but power works best when nobody questions it. Increasingly, cities are asking hard questions, and those questions are hard, changing the balance of negotiations. The real story is not whether FIFA wins or loses a single negotiation. The real story is leverage. For decades, FIFA held most of it. Cities competed for the opportunity to host, governments adjusted regulations, and terms were largely accepted. But leverage shifts when conditions change. Today, public accountability is greater, investigative reporting is more aggressive, and political leaders face unprecedented scrutiny over major spending decisions. Toronto and Vancouver may not have transformed FIFA overnight, but they demonstrated something crucial. Host cities are not powerless. Once that lesson spreads, every future negotiation becomes more complex. The World Cups of 2030 and 2034 may be shaped as much by lawyers and city planners as by football executives. The football itself will still be spectacular. Stadiums will fill, the world's best players will compete, and fans will celebrate unforgettable moments. But after the final whistle of World Cup 2026, another conversation will continue inside city halls, budget committees, and planning offices around the world. Officials will study what happened. They will compare costs, review outcomes, and ask whether the traditional relationship between FIFA and host cities still makes sense. FIFA will face a decision of its own: adapt to an era of tougher negotiations or continue relying on a model built for a different time. Because the most important battles surrounding World Cup 2026 may never happen on the pitch. It may happen across negotiating tables. And for the first time in decades, the other side is no longer automatically saying yes.